The problem in our country is that we believe that quantity is more important than quality. More isn't better. If what you already have isn't serving you, isn't bringing you joy, happiness, peace, and a better tomorrow, having more of that is not going to make you happier. If 10 Skittles aren't meeting your need, having 50 more probably isn't going to make you any happier, unless you're a Skittle nut. When the quality of life women have had to endure for longer than our country and longer than Great Britain has existed, it may be tradition to treat women like second-class citizens and that a legacy is just kids and a family. There are many forms of legacies. Being a teacher can be a legacy. As long as you help one person gain a better future, that is the best legacy you can ever have. It does not mean you have to have kids. And I'm not saying having kids is wrong. What is wrong is expecting everyone to have kids, expecting everyone to be fulfilled, or this is even worse. They don't care if a woman is fulfilled. Because if they've ever asked a woman, a giant number of women, they would have found out the average woman is not happy being a mother, a wife. If you actually go on YouTube, and I've done this, they interviewed women who endured the 50s and 60s, what they thought about the nuclear family. Half of the women in America were unhappy. Probably 3 out of 4. Gender roles do not make people happy. And if you're one of those lucky people, and by lucky I mean your conformity isn't strangling you alive because your personality, your interests, and your passions line up very similar to what's expected of you in your gender, you're lucky. But for a lot of people out there, they want and will only be happy doing things that are very different to what society wants them to be. I would say most of the people who have made the greatest impact in world history, especially American history, were like no one else at that time. You look at Andy Warhol. Being an artist is not deemed a masculine career. Being a chef, until the 20th century, being a chef was not a masculine, approved, or revered career. Even though 9 out of 10 celebrity chefs out there are men. So, I think it all comes down to the family you're raised in. Did they allow kids to embrace the differences in gender? Did your parents and environment allow a boy, a girl, or whatever label you're under? Did your parents allow you to blur the expectations of your gender? My family would not allow boys to play with dolls, jump rope. This is sexism. And I'm even going to go further. This is transphobic. And yeah, a small group of people on this planet are transgender. If you don't allow your kids, or worse, teach your kids that because you're a certain gender, you can only play with these things, that is transphobic. want to, as long as the toys are safe and they're not a choking hazard. I mean, who cares? Who cares if boys play with dolls? It shouldn't matter. As long as the toys are creating a safe environment where a kid's imagination, curiosity, and education is being pursued, who cares? Who cares what they're playing with? I grew up in such a transphobic environment. And it's ironic because they didn't even talk about transphobia or trans people. They erased it entirely. That is sick. Can you imagine struggling as a trans individual? I would say that the most persecuted group in the Western Hemisphere, probably everywhere. Imagine being in that group and the most privileged white religious environments refuse to acknowledge you exist, or worse, completely erase your identity, your labels, your struggle, your pain, and villainize you to those white people's kids. Or I'll even go a step further, make you out to be a predator. And once you turn 18, you're responsible for whatever you don't know. We have the internet. You can look up anything. If I see a foreign language, audio or written, that I don't understand, I take a picture of it and find out. I recently watched Heated Rivalry. I didn't understand because I was using a third-party site. I did not understand, and they did not have Russian subtitles. So I dubbed it and found out what they were saying. That's the whole thing. We're in 2026. What you don't know is not your fault per se, but the pursuit, the lack of pursuit to find out is your problem. You're responsible when you do not pursue knowledge. Especially if you're in America. If you have a phone, you can find out anything. Anything. And I've learned debates can be fun, but be very careful who you debate. Time is one thing you cannot get back. And if somebody does not have critical thinking, or worse, villainizes critical thinking, I will not debate these people. It would be like debating with a farmyard animal. You're not going to understand each other. They're going to throw a fit. My own family is the same way. I've learned to avoid religion, politics, and gender completely. Because nobody is going to be benefited from having a conversation where someone's yelling slurs and the other person is trying as hard as they can not to slap the other person. That's usually my role. I mean, I came out to my family because I wanted there to be no miscommunication. I did not want my parents, who are approaching 72 and 71 later this year, I wanted there to be no misunderstanding, no imaginary expectations. I wanted everyone to know who I was. They don't have to agree with it. They don't have to validate it. They don't even have to acknowledge we had the conversation, even though that's rude. The nicest thing you can do for people is to be honest, to be visible, and transparent. It's not your fault if they get mad. That's a symptom of a heart problem on their part. And most bigots are very ignorant. Some just, maybe they grew up in a time where these things just were not talked about. But they would have to be over 60 years old. Because Stonewall happened in the 60s. The AIDS crisis happened in the 80s. There's no way people grew up not knowing certain things. was homeschooled in Alaska without Wi-Fi, television, radio, mainstream movies, and I still knew it. I still knew about things. I did not know about the queer community. I think I was 17 when I first saw something that would resemble being gay. Of course, I was taught, trained, and indoctrinated to believe it's wrong. And I look at the animal kingdom as the answer to most of life's problems. If something doesn't exist and is a choice, why aren't we out there trying to fix animals? We have recorded evidence that there are lots of genus species out there that are gay. Why aren't we out there doing conversion therapy on animals? Do not misunderstand. I'm not saying I want them to, but why aren't they? If human beings go through the terrible thing called conversion therapy, why aren't we trying to fix animals? If it's a choice, why aren't we fixing animals too? If it's really as unnatural and a choice as bigots like to make it appear to be, why aren't we fixing animals? Well, my thought is they'll probably get kicked or mauled. And honestly, if you get near an animal with the intention of changing who it is, you probably deserve to get kicked. It's a pity humans haven't figured that out. But it always surprises me that people will ignore evidence from science, health, everything, if it doesn't line up with their point of views. My point of views are based on evidence from the scientific community. If anything ever pops up that completely debunks what I previously believed, as long as it checks all the boxes that shows they went through the hoops that prove this information is valid, and it's a rigorous progress, I will change my beliefs immediately. Anyone who uses critical thinking would. If there is scientific evidence, historical evidence that can prove something, I have no problem changing my views. Because that's what people who want education, they want to be informed and have correct, fact-based information, that's what they want to do. I grew up in an environment where we were stuck in the 1950s. Segregation? Sometimes it felt like the 1960s. And yeah, I was taught about the civil rights movement, but when you grow up in a religion that says African Americans are cursed because of the Old Testament, I'm not really going to rely on their version of the civil rights movement. My family actually taught me, and this is quite disturbing, the Underground Railroad was a rebellion against God. If you're born into slavery, the Bible says you're to remain in slavery. Allow yourself, and the word allow is pretty, really doesn't hold up. Nobody allows themselves to be a slave. No one allows themselves to be trafficked. That's why they call it a violation of human rights. Christianity is the reason, one of the three reasons, why slavery lasted so much longer. White privilege and sexism are the other two reasons. It's deplorable. And yet, the biggest Christian minds of the 21st century, the ones who have the ear of President Trump, believe slavery is not as bad as it was. I've seen pictures of white people standing next to trees where African American slaves who tried to run away are slightly up in the air for a certain reason, which I'm not going to say. Adults will probably understand. Lynching is not acceptable. There's a reason why it's a hate crime. You do not have to be any race specifically for it to be less of a hate crime. Slavery was terrible. I mean, I don't think there's anything in human history as awful as slavery. Slavery looks like many different things. It can be human trafficking, child trafficking, sex slavery, or physical slavery, where people's physical work is exploited. That is the African American slavery context. I wasn't taught about the other parts of slavery, the horrible things that female slaves went through. There is nothing about slavery that is good. It is so egregious. It is awful. We should view slavery the same way we view what Josh Duggar did and what his brother is now being accused of. Well, he confessed, so it's not really being accused, is it? We should view slavery in the same way we view predators, because slavery is predation. I don't think any white person ever asked any other race, any other ethnicity, do you want to be shackled? I think the only exception to that is in societies where people induce themselves into servitude to pay off debt, or because that's something their society did. It doesn't make it any less predatory. We should view slavery in the same way we view murder and rape. Human trafficking is all about slavery. Anyone who thinks slavery is not going on is ignorant or willfully blind. That's why in a previous video I talked about biblical marriage. Biblical roles is slavery. It's the subjection of one gender and the primary benefit of another. Even if you're not actively grooming, preying on your wife, adhering to biblical values is slavery. The women's role is glorified trad wife slavery. It's predatory because a woman's value is on her labor, her body, but nothing about who she is. It's about what she provides for a man. And the gender of the person's partner isn't even up for debate. It's going to be a man. That's the way they view women. Now, there's a reason why conservative Christians require a woman to marry a man and a man to marry a woman. Because two equals can't marry. They shouldn't marry, according to these people. That's why they don't believe in gay marriage. They don't want equals marrying each other. They don't want two men or two women, because there's nobody to exploit, in theory. There's nobody in that relationship that is better than the other. One person doesn't have a role that's so ingrained in your body, your mind, in your actions, that one person is not actively exploiting and preying on the other person. That's why they don't like gay marriage. They see women as inferior. And if you can't have kids, these people think, what's the point in marriage? Because that's what they think marriage is. Women obeying and rolling over for men, and men profiting and getting male validation. That's what marriage is in a nutshell. And you can dress it up as biblical marriage or traditional family values, because we all know what those people are doing when nobody's around. I would pay, if I had $1 million, I would pay $1 million to see everybody's browsing history. I read something yesterday on YouTube where a guy would pay $1 million for Joel Webbin's browser history. All these traditional Christian leaders, if I had the money, I'd pay $1 million to see each and every one of these sexually repressed men's browsing history. It doesn't matter what a man says. It's what your internet records that's the real truth. It should not be a surprise. It really should not. When anyone writes, talks, or is on the internet using buzzwords like the nuclear family, traditional values, protect the family, protect the children, protect biblical marriage, unless I can see their browsing history, the first thing that shoots into my mind is protect the kids from this person. People who are sexually repressed, especially in religion, I have a very good idea what they do when they're alone. And it doesn't even have to be criminal. It can be simply things that Christians just don't talk about. I mean, there are corn addictions, and I've made videos where I do not believe corn addiction is a thing. The medical community doesn't even recognize a corn addiction. Because something is only bad when it impacts your life in a negative fashion. And even then, if it can't kill you, and it's not actively physically harming another person, and it's not a tremendous strain on your mental health, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. If it doesn't fit those guidelines, it's not necessarily a bad thing. But religion does one thing well. It creates a disease that does not exist. There is no cure. And then they create a cure. A corn addiction is not an addiction. Having certain thoughts is not a problem. It is not a problem. And if you don't have those thoughts or desires, that's not a problem either. The problem is being a part of a culture, a religion, a church, a family that makes you hide it, makes you say the opposite of what you're doing. And then you villainize people who are doing just what you do, but you're hiding it. Any environment that makes you hide legal, perfectly healthy, normal behavior and making you think that normal behavior is a sickness is not a safe place to be in. Watching and doing adult entertainment is not a sin. It's not a flaw. It's not an addiction. It's what 99% of people on this planet do. Everybody who wants to have sex is actively doing it or hope to do it in the near future. Everyone is pursuing something some way. I've always wondered in churches, they're always harping on corn addictions. But they never harp on women reading erotic novels. Because, fun fact, most Baptist churches and extreme versions of nationalistic Christianity, they don't believe women enjoy sex. So why would they think women have the desires enough to have an addiction? Yeah, because the dynamics of these relationships, platonic, romantic, familial, it's always with the dynamics that one person wants something and the other person just has to deal with that other person's needs. That's not a relationship. That's not a healthy dynamic. Having needs, having desires are not the problem. You should not look to one person to meet all your needs. That is toxic, or at least borderline unhealthy. This is why most marriages don't last. Women want their partner, regardless of what gender and orientation their partner is. Modern marriage, everyone fits into one person. You need friends. You need family or a surrogate family. You need a lot of people that give you different things in your life. Professional, personal, intimate. Relying on one person to meet all of your needs, you are setting yourself up for problems. I find it ironic that women are the 70% of the people that initiate divorce. And I talked to a woman at my job a few days ago. She's getting a divorce. And I'm not going to go into specifics and all that. Basically, her husband would hit her. And she wanted to reconcile, which I told her is not a smart thing to do. I showed empathy and compassion, telling her I understand why she would want to stay, but it's not a safe environment. She then went on to say her husband, instead of even trying once to go to therapy to fix their problems or to iron out their issues, which I think the only way that's going to happen is if somebody gets a restraining order. He did not want to do any of the work to restore anything, even though I counseled her to not even consider reconciliation. I mean, you do not wait until someone hits you to even contemplate fixing your relationship. Your relationship should be over before someone hits you. And he did not want to do anything. No therapy, no coming 50% of the way, nothing. And she said, why wouldn't a guy fight for his marriage? And I said, because you're now requiring him to do more work than he's ever done. You've done 90% of the emotional labor for your entire marriage, based on the evidence she gave me. Him having to do 50%, to be in the moment, to fix, to listen, is too much for most men. Once they've won you, once you share their name, their house, most men just stop pursuing you. That's the wife's job. The wife's job, according to these toxic red pill men, the wife's job is to do the appointments, to create the events, the parties, the sexual and emotional connection. And I said, he's not going to do his share because he's basically used you as a doormat your entire marriage. Why would you expect him to do more than he's never shown any effort to do? I mean, it's okay to want a guy to do more than he's done, but you can't really be shocked when he doesn't do anything beyond what he's always done. And I said, when people show you who they really are, believe them the first time and leave. Do not confront them. Do not try to do anything. Leave. If somebody isn't going to show you enough respect to do as much emotional labor, domestic assistance, and treating you with more respect than the average stranger shows another stranger, he's shown you who he is, or she's shown you who they are. I would rather be by myself enjoying my own shadow than be around people of any distinction of relationship or relation, than be around those kind of people. Women are so terrified of being alone. Some of them are ending up in coffins or in dangerous situations. The safest thing a woman can ever do is get in touch with her femininity, her inner child. Conquer your fear of being alone, and most toxic relationships will no longer look inviting to you. If the person you're with doesn't inspire you to be the best version of yourself, or even better, you should be the best version of yourself before you even meet them. If they're not your biggest cheerleader, if they don't make your life easier, better, more worth living, I would rather have my own company. I grew up in an environment where the worst thing that could happen to a woman is she retains her maiden name and live a life of spinsterhood. And yet I've known a lot of married people, secular wives, religious biblical wives. None of them were really ever happy. I can't name 5 that were happy. But the stories I would hear in my mother's basement, stuff that biblical wives would tell her, you would not believe the stories. And I've made videos about these things. Biblical marriage is a fraud. It's as authentic as a used car salesman. And you can call marriage whatever you want. I personally use the F word. But any marriage, any relationship you're in that adheres to patriarchal gender expectations is a power imbalance. And the person who gets the short stick is the woman every single time. Because marriage was not designed to benefit women. There's nothing about marriage that benefits women. Gaining social standing, gaining children is not an advantage. I mean, it can make you happy if that's not the reason you're entering marriage. But it's not going to make you happy. Because you can gain all those things without a man. And if you're in an environment that won't let you gain those things, get out of that environment. It's pretty simple. If you're in a church and they only respect you and you can only have authority when you're married, get out of that environment. It's pretty simple. That environment is not worthy of your time and your attention and your money. This is why I always tell people, it's not women's fault. Women are born into a system and into a patriarchy that views them as less than. Women are doomed the day they're born unless you grow up in a feminist, anti-God environment that tells you the evils of the patriarchy and of the male gaze. Women are they're starting from such a low place, no fault of their own, that unless you get the odds from the cradle that your parents abhor anything that you see in a church service, women do not stand a chance. Women have to go to therapy. Women have to sometimes escape from dangerous situations, be married to awful losers, be exploited, shamed, and ostracized before women see the realities of being a woman. It shouldn't be that way, but it usually is. It takes a lot of people dying, a lot of people surviving before they made seatbelts the law. Our society, our religions are set up to inherently benefit men. And if men can't live up to, can't perform in the way men are supposed to, that's where homophobia comes from. You cannot have homophobia without sexism. And you can't have sexism without homophobia. It's like salt and pepper. Sexism is the belief. Misogyny is the action. That's what my therapist would always tell me. And if men saw the value in who women are, not what they do, not what they give, not what they sacrifice, but who they are as an individual, sexism would be almost eradicated. Homophobia would be villainized. Because homophobia is all about men not adhering to a rigid gender expectation. Any man who dares show female traits is dehumanized because they don't see humanity in being a woman. And I don't mean to be crude, but any woman who thinks men see her as something worthy of respect, the average man out there sees a woman as a whole. They don't see women as fully autonomous, fully human, fully whole, W-H-O-L-E. They see women as kind of like a purse, something men can use, men can wear, men can hold on their arm, something that is useful to what they need, what they want, and what they hope to achieve. They don't see women as being a human being. And this is the problem. The very big problem with our society. We congratulate men. Men congratulate men when they dehumanize women. I mean, look at our president. I don't think there is a man on this planet. If there was an award for the man who's dehumanized the most people, it would be Trump. I would have nominated Jeffrey Epstein, but he's dead. The people a man spends time with, the people a man defends and protects, says more about them than anything. If a man supports a predator, if a man votes against women's rights, believe a man the first time he shows you he's a piece of shit. And when you grow up in an environment that celebrates masculinity, villainizes femininity, and dehumanizes anyone that merges off masculinity, whether they started masculine, was feminine, and then changed into more masculine traits, or just anything that doesn't reflect the masculine expectations of just being cis and heterosexual male. I mean, you don't have to be anything but all the privileged groups. But if your hobbies aren't deemed masculine, if your career is not a masculine dominated field, if you don't have a masculine name, you can still be punished. I mean, you look at the lives of artists and men who held jobs and interests that were not deemed masculine for their time period. They were villainized. And some female-dominated careers, they still villainize men for getting into female-dominated fields. People I knew would make jokes about male nurses, female doctors. I mean, before 1930, female doctors, especially female white doctors, were not as prevalent or accepted by men or society like they are now. Especially back during the time when Midwest and the Pacific Coast were being developed and colonialized, like during the second half of the 1800s, like the Wild West time periods. Women doctors were rare. Therapists, like OGBYNs, any physical therapy, occupational therapy, massage therapy is female-dominated fields. Men are rare, but they're becoming more dominant, which I actually enjoy. People's careers and patient comfort levels are all about gender. And every time we do a giant leap forward, within 2 generations, we try to go back. I mean, look at all the social and religious, political jumps forward we've taken since 1965. We're trying to go back 150 years. Like, why would you want to do that? There's only one answer. Men will benefit. And I've taken history classes. I know that in the 1950s, half of women worked in some capacity. And by worked, I mean they were paid. All women worked, but only half of them were paid. After World War II, 1 out of 3 women were paid for a job, while all women worked in some domestic environment. You would have to go back over 125 years. But even then, you would find women working for no change. Women have always worked longer hours than men. I read something online. I forget who did it, but this medical center looked at the amount of hours women work in the home, paid and unpaid. Women during the week, on average, work 17 hours more a week than men. So that's about between 2 and 3 hours more work for women every day, usually unpaid. Women on average work a paid shift, and then they come home and do an entire or a half of an unpaid shift. Men come home and either do domestic labor or they don't. But it's never to the extreme or consistency or gendered expectation it is for women. So you take 17 hours times 52 weeks. On average, women work a 40-hour work week of, it's somewhere around 6 weeks in the 40-hour range, more a calendar year, than men work unpaid. When men say they do more work than women, they don't know what they're talking about. I would say the job that never ends is being a mother. That's why I make a joke when I work in the medical field. You can hate laundry, you can hate dishes, you can hate collecting money, but it's job security. It's very true. Men have always devalued and erased female labor. Because if it's not a masculine labor, it's invalidated. It's infantilized. Men say it's great to be a wife, a mother, and to take care of children. But if the men aren't consistently doing those tasks because they are alive, these are their kids, and that is their job as an adult man, then it's really not as great as these men are making it out to be. Because if you won't do it yourself, pulling your own weight, not doing a woman a favor, but doing it because you're an adult, then that task really isn't as good as you're lying it is. That's why I always tell people, men can say there's tremendous amount value in being a woman, doing female tasks. But if they're never willing to do it and they avoid and perform weaponized incompetence so they don't have to, they're lying about the value. Women are not equal if they're not at least half of the time in charge. And they're not in charge because it's a symptom of women not being as valued, respected, and relied upon compared to men. That's why any male-centered religion or institution that has never or almost never had women in positions of religious authority, they don't know equality if it bit them in the butt. How could that? How can you value a woman being in charge of a man if most of these people, most of these bishops, cardinals, and popes have probably never been under the religious authority of a woman, period? And that's why I always say, if you wouldn't do somebody's job that you claim is equal to you, you're a liar. Same difference. I can say that I respect a certain nationality of people, but if I won't sit next to them, if I won't defend their rights, and I secretly villainize them or talk trash about them when that group of people is not around, I'm a liar. Luckily, I don't do those things. But it's the same difference. You cannot call women valuable, human, and a gift, but actively, daily avoid what that person does, dehumanize their activity, dehumanize their existence, eradicate, invalidate, and erase that person's biblical role, and avoid doing anything they do. And if you can still call that person equal to you, you live in delusion land. And the more conservative an environment, a marriage, a relationship is, the less a man sees a woman as a human being. That's not to say every conservative man dehumanizes women, but that's the culture they're protecting, supporting, and financing. I mean, it's Me Too on roller skates. You cannot say that I support Me Too and then support the directors that caused the Me Too movement to start. That's why I don't watch movies of people who hurt women. I don't support any business, any institution, anyone who marginalizes anybody, harasses people, and threatens people and their careers. Because your money tells white men of privilege what they can get away with. And my own sister said, "You have no right to do that." And I said, "Yeah, I do. It's my money. I want my money to go to things that make women's lives better, give children and the next generation a better tomorrow. I want to support anyone that limits white supremacy and doesn't perpetuate ethnical disparities. And I avoid going to movie premieres and watching movies where I spend my money because I do not want to support terrible people. And that's my own personal opinion. So, it is what it is. But enmeshment is a system that validates men at the expense of women. And I think women deserve better. I think gay people deserve better. Children deserve better. there's not one right way to do something. There are many ways to do something, as long as it makes sense. And there's a good reason for doing it that way, where it doesn't hurt people. Who cares? Well, my family believed there was one right way to do everything. And it always included God, Jesus, and the white man. We have a heart problem. A very deep, very visible lately heart problem. People who have empathy and compassion about social issues, politics, any marginalized or targeted, villainized, and dehumanized groups of people, they don't vote and they do not support these kind of people. They just don't. It's like Pandora's box. Once you see something, you can't unsee it. That's why I always tell my family, as an atheist, when my Christian family tries to get me to be saved again, my response is, once you see certain things about Christianity, you can't unsee it. Once I saw the white supremacy, the female subjugation, the female dehumanization, the gay villainy, where people villainize, target, and dehumanize anyone who isn't cis, heterosexual, or acting masculine, you can't unsee it. And I don't want to unsee it. That's the thing my Christian family will never get through their thick heads. I don't want to unsee it. I don't want to forget. I don't want to take, I think it's the blue pill. I don't want to take the red one either, because I know what the manosphere is. But it's like, I don't want to forget. I don't want to live in a world where white supremacy is hidden. I don't want to live in a world where I support, vote, and financially give to groups of people that make gay people out to be a sin. Gay people, there's nothing wrong with gay people. I mean, every group of people has a few bad apples. But when 53% of predators are white, cis, heterosexual men, usually a married man, I am more likely to be exploited by heterosexual white men than I am by gay people. I mean, trans people commit less than 1% of acts of violence or predation in America. I am not worried for my safety when I'm sitting next to gay and trans people. I mean, sitting next to anyone, I mean, it can happen. But, I mean, I have 50 times less likely to be hurt sitting next to a non-hetero cis man. So, people can say whatever they want, but they're talking out of their butt. The most harmful thing we teach people is that you have to be anything. And it's very true. You don't have to be anything. There's no default of any kind. Why we expect and just assume people are a certain way shows how stupid and ignorant we are as a group of people. I do not assume anything about people. Why would I? I just assume that people are into everything, every legal thing. I just assume everyone likes all genders, and until they tell me otherwise, I just expect they are what they are. But I don't know what it is about our country. We're one of the most racist countries on the planet. We're so backward. We think we are the free thinkers of society. I mean, women, gay people, atheists have a safer, better tomorrow in places like Sweden, Norway. And it's true. The more atheistic your country is, the more progressive and safe it is for minorities. And that's why countries where 80% or more are atheists are the best countries on the planet. And spoiler alert, it's not America. I cannot wait for the day when the majority of people in America reject religion entirely. Our lives are so much more worth living without religion. When we start living life according to what we want and not a book that causes sexual repression, we'd all be in a better place. As I always say, I do not take life tips from sexually repressed people or people who believe in a book that glorifies slavery and genocide. They call me a godless, evil atheist, and I always respond, well, less than 1% of prison inmates are atheists, while 2 out of 3 prison inmates in America believe in the God of the Bible. I am much safer next to a godless atheist than I am next to somebody who believes in the God of the Bible and who believes that me as being a woman, I'm inferior. People don't like the way I live my life. Well, nobody asked their opinion. And the nice thing about being in 2026, I do not have to make a man happy. I do not care what a man thinks. And anyone who doesn't like the way I live my life, they're angry because they're not able to use me, exploit me, or gain something from me. That's why men don't like me being single, child-free, and living my best life, because they don't have the opportunity to exploit me. And Christians always tell me, well, when you grow up, you'll want to have a husband, be a wife, and have kids. And I said, it will never happen. I'm 32 years old. I don't want to have kids. I don't believe you need any of those things to be happy. Because if you can't find happiness from within, going to someone else to fix the problem is setting you up for disappointment. That's what my therapist always says. If you want, the most important relationship you'll ever have is with yourself. That's why they call it tender love and care. I've had Christians tell me that my standards are too high. My response is, well, I've known a few women that they settled and they said, where are they? Dead, stalked, hiding, and dead. Having high standards is not a problem. And it's not the women's fault they died. They grew up in a society that taught these women it's better to be with a loser or an abuser than be with people or yourself who values you as a human being. Instead of telling women to choose better, we need to start telling women, just stop choosing anyone but yourself. Just choosing anyone but yourself, what's best for yourself, what's good for yourself, what makes your life a better version of yourself. You're setting yourself up for problems. Don't go to anyone else to be happy. Don't go to anyone else for self-respect, validation. You have to go within yourself. And if you can't or won't do that, you're setting yourself up for problems. That doesn't mean you can't have friends, people you trust, people you ask an opinion about. But be very careful whose opinion has power over you. Women will get plastic surgery, change their wardrobe, their hair, they'll bleach their body for validation. And I'm not judging anybody. In this political climate, how we treat and devalue women, I don't blame women for wanting to be accepted by anybody. And whatever means that takes, I do not blame women at all. I might blame them a little if they grew up in a society that told women how to think better, how to accept themselves for who they are. But we don't live in that society. The society I grew up in, and still live in, believes women have expiration dates, like tuna sandwiches. That is disgusting. And it always surprises me how men who would not fit the picture of masculinity are usually the first people to dehumanize or shame a woman for having 7% body fat, when the men commenting probably have at least 20% body fat. If you don't fit the version of what you're trying to push on women, just don't say it. You cannot expect a woman to be Barbie if you're not Ken. But that's the male gaze for you. Ugly men will always want to be around beautiful young girls because that's how our society functions. It's sick, but I mean, that's the way it is. Hopefully, the people who come after me fix that, or at least change the way we view those kind of things.